Once again, I welcome everybody on behalf of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, the Department of English. This is the course 7 that we are hosting, or on which we'll have kind of interaction today. This being the first class, I welcome you once again and hope our online classes would go as interactive as possible. Before I start speaking on the subject, I would like to share a few things with you. You all know that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University is one institution where we have this concept of counseling rather than conventional lecture. The reason being is that in our open distance learning system, we provide learning material to all the students and expect that they come to the counseling class after reading different chapters, different topics, and seek clarification and clarify their doubts about different topics they couldn't understand. So we'll just keep that in mind, and as a facilitator, rather than being a teacher, what I would do is I'll break the ice and I'll start discussing a few topics, and then that way we'll interact and we'll see that how academically and student friendly we can move forward. So before we delve into the academic subjects, I want to request all of you to introduce yourself one by one, so that we'll know who are there in the classroom and who couldn't attend.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning.
I am Ramu.
Okay.
So I've been a teacher of English for more than 12 years in CBSE schools, sir. And now I'm pursuing my post-graduation. Recently qualified AP set and looking for net qualification.
Excellent. I wish you luck for your preparation.
Thank you, sir.
I hope that you will qualify sooner than later.
Thank you, sir.
So one demerit, I would say, of online classes is that we would not be able to see each other. Okay? Many people feel it uncomfortable or because of privacy reasons to switch on their cameras. That is perfectly fine. But when it comes to interaction, you can always do by just unmuting yourself. So that way, your teacher will also feel that he's connected with you, and it will give a lot of confidence to the teacher to move forward and take feedback from you as he proceeds further. So I request you to introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Pranita from MBNR branch.
Can you be a little loud, Pranita?
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes.
I'm from Mahabubnagar branch, sir.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, please go on.
Sir, I completed the DED and BEd. Now I'm preparing for DSC, sir. Hello.
Hello. Pranita, I couldn't get you. Maybe your mic is at a very minimum level of sound. Could you please increase the volume?
Hello. Hello, sir. Hello.
Pranita, could you hear me?
Yes, sir. Hello.
Okay. Anyone else, please? We have John, we have Manikanta, we have Akela, Viswa. This is an opportunity to know each other, and when we discuss subject, it will be easier for you as well as for me to do one-to-one interaction. The whole purpose of online class being organized by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University is to clarify your doubts. So it requires a conversation between you and me. I hope you understand that. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll start talking about the paper that I'm dealing with for this semester students or for the second year students. The title of the course is Aspects of Language and Their Relation to Literature. Now you notice that there are two different things here. One is language. I'll try to highlight something. Right? And you have literature. These are the two different things we have in this paper. And if you actually look at the very degree that you are doing, that is MA English, right? MA English. Now, what do you study in this degree?
We study masters in literature, sir.
Masters in literature. Thank you, Sudhara. Yeah. So the issue is, when you are saying English, isn't it a language? It is indeed a language. But then, when you are doing it as a course, you are ending up studying literature. Now, how come a literature degree is being offered with the title of a language? That is and that should be our starting point to understand this whole course. That is course 7. This is a paper 7 of you, right, in your second year. So what exactly the relation between language and literature? Why in a degree which is titled English, we are ending up studying literature? What kind of connection do you think there exists between these two?
So language is an expression. So literature is completely about the existence, the life at that time. So when we get to know about the life at that time, automatically how the language changes from at various degrees from time to time, we'll get to know the changes also in language when we read literature.
Great. Thank you, Ramu, for adding this point. Yeah. Anybody else? What kind of relation do you see that exists between language and literature?
Language is a syntax, sir, which is in an organized structure manner. Like we have some grammatical rules which have to be followed, and also some literary devices which we use to express the words or feelings or the situations or the events. Whereas literature is already happened events which we study with the usage of language.
Good. Sugarji, very good. Yeah, anybody else would like to share their understanding of what kind of relation exists between the language and literature?
Excuse me,
Narayan Garu, would you like to say something?
excuse me, sir. I want to.
Yeah.
Language is a thing which we can express our feelings, our thoughts, our inner things, whatever we want to express and explain to others and show to others. And literature is a past history which has happened already thousands of years ago and written by different authors and the writers of the particular period. That is literature.
Okay. So I'm writing down a few things while you bring up the different points. Okay. Narayan Garu, would you like to say something? Because your mic is unknown. Okay, so we got to know a couple of very interesting points from your end. Yes, if I have to summarize your ideas, your thoughts, you mean to say that there exists a relation between language and literature, right? Now we'll look at it slightly in a very in a systematic way. That is, number one, we'll look at purpose of both language and literature. Okay? From there we start, so that we'll have a very clear picture of how these two are related. Now, coming to language, we all know that the purpose of a language is to act as a means of communication. Do you agree with this thing? This statement?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we as human beings use language to communicate, which means communicate ideas, communicate experiences, communicate feelings, and a lot more things, right? Basically, it is acting as a means, okay, to express ourselves, to communicate. Now, this is the purpose of a language, right? And that is why you have that people using so many languages to express themselves. Every society has one or more than one language. There are some societies which are monolingual, where the whole society uses only one language. But there are societies where we have multiple languages. Take the example of India. We have more than 1,500 languages, right? Which are spoken, as well as some are written, and some have their scripts as well. Okay, so in order to fulfill the need to communicate, we as human beings use language. But there is a distinction between the language that we use and the language that is used by other beings, especially animals. Can you think of how similar and different the human language and language of animals is?
The example of cows, sir, where it says amba and where we say amma in Telugu.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the sounding where it is little familiar or simultaneous.
Okay. So in both the languages, I'm just noting a few points here. For example, I'm noting one point here is language at its base is basically a sound. Can we say that? Language at its base, at its core, is a system of sound. Okay. Okay. Second.
Sign. Sign, sir. Sign.
Fine.
Signals.
Oh, signals.
Sign.
Signs and symbols, you mean to say. Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So sound, signs and symbols. Okay, very good. So these are the things which are similar or different in human languages and language of the animal. Okay, anything else? There are a lot more things we can talk about. And
verbal as well as non-verbal, sir. verbal communication and non-verbal communication we have in language.
Verbal and non-verbal.
Non-verbal.
Very good. These are two different aspects, in language, in human and animal language. Okay. We'll take one point at a time, but first we'll list down what are the possible similarities and dissimilarities between the language that we use and the language used by animals. So far, so good. We have got 3 different points to talk about. Anything else? Please go on.
So, like when we talk about differences, so like human beings, like I remember, like we can quickly switch over to another, topic, which is I think not there in animals. Like while talking about, like, I remember this we studied in the first year that while watching a TV, suddenly we can, talk about something else. Watching cricket match, we start talking about the weather in a particular place. But this is not true in case of animals.
Shifting subject.
Yeah, shifting,
Yeah.
and also like the human mind, like it gets, I think, displaced. We can talk about India, we can talk about the world, we can talk about any topic.
Displacement.
Yeah, displacement. So,
Hmm.
which is again not there in animals.
Oh. We'll critically look at what is there, what is not there, if it is there, how and why. We'll look at those things. So thank you for adding these 2 points. Anything else from your side?
Language comprises several aspects,
Yeah.
such as context and structures, and as Sudhama mentioned, that like sounds and other words or something else.
Mhm. Okay. Good. Okay, so let's start with human language. When we say human language, language as such starts with sound. Okay, the written form of the language is a much later development, and that is why you see that there exists a lot of dialects first. Okay, and those dialects, when they become prominent, people start working on the symbols, signs, and they start developing a system of writing, and that becomes a script, and from there develops the entire written language. Okay, so language as such starts with the sound. So the very basis of any language is sound, and that is why you see that there is a similarity between human language and the language of animals, where both use sounds to communicate. Right? It is very clear, and you have already agreed with this point that as human beings make different kinds of sounds to communicate with fellow beings. Similarly, animals also make a different kind of sounds to communicate with their fellow animals. Okay. Now the thing is that there is a clear distinction between animals and human beings, or human beings and any other species on this planet Earth. The fact that human being is the most complex of species, right? Its overall powers, its abilities, right? Its potential is much we say broader, larger than any other species on this planet. So the language that is spoken by a human being is also complex. Take, for example, a dog. Right? How many possible sounds a dog makes? Any idea?
Sir, would you repeat?
See, we are trying to understand the similarities and difference between the human language and language of the animal. So we started with the sound. Now, I said that human beings as a species are very complex. So their language itself is also complex. But when it comes to animals, their overall things are not that complex. For example, take the number of the kind of sounds a dog makes. Is it limited or unlimited? Or do you find a dog barking in Japan and the dog barking in America and India would be similar or different in the sound?
Similar, sir.
Similar, right? But when you see that a person communicating being in Japan and other person communicating being in Telugu state of Telangana or Andhra or somebody in California, you see that there is no similarity in the way the kind of sounds they make, right? Do you agree with this or not?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
But in case of animals, you see that whether the dog is in Japan, the dog is in California or in Hyderabad, it will make similar sound, a similar limited number of sounds. First, we agree to the point that both animals and human language is based on sounds. But when it comes to number of sounds, human sounds are complex. Human language is complex. The kind of sounds a human being is able to produce is very complex. In our country itself, we have 1,500 plus languages. But when it comes to animals like the dog, their number of sounds is same, right? Irrespective of which part of the world they live in. They are domesticated. So human language has unlimited number of sounds, whereas animal language has limited number of sounds. Okay, so I hope we have dealt with this point. Shall we move on to the next point, or do you want me to clarify further on that?
Just would like to add, sir. That whale has more complex sounds while it is communicating in whale song. In one of the documentaries, I happened to observe that they said it had more than 100 complex sounds. So not 100, 1,000, sir. 1,000 complex sounds that recorded, and they are communicating. The communication can be reached like around 50 kilometers.
Okay, even then, all the whales can make a maximum of 1,000 different sounds. Is it?
Yes, sir.
2,000 different sounds. But take example of you and me. I alone, if I am a monolingual speaker, can make not just 1,000, many thousands of sounds. Just me as an individual. If I am speaking a single language, I can produce maybe 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 different varieties of sounds just to speak one language, to communicate with one set of people. But there are such 1,500 plus varieties existing in our country. And if you take it at a global level, 5,000 plus languages, which have been documented. So now, can these two be compared? 1,000 different sounds which a whale is able to produce, and 5,000 plus languages human beings were able to document. Maybe there could be even more, but on record there are 5,000 plus languages. And each language has unlimited number of sounds. Just if you open up an English dictionary, you'll find that at least 1 lakh entries. Right. which means in that one particular language, there are 1 lakh different sounds. In fact, you multiply it into 5-fold or 10-fold, because the people who are pronouncing that particular word may not pronounce in the same way, isn't it? I'm just I'm reminded of one movie PK, where Amir Khan showed us how acha can be pronounced in multiple ways. Do you remember that from that movie? Acha, 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 acha. Right? He showed us. He demonstrated was that how in how many different ways just one word can be pronounced. So each each word is different. Each pronunciation is different. So human language is very, very complex when it comes to sounds. I hope you got that point. So there is no comparison whatsoever between animal language and the complexity that human language has. Moving on to second point, that is signs and symbols. Whatever you see as written signs and symbols, right? The letter W that we write like this is actually assigned to a particular sound. Wow, right? Isn't it? So this sign is representing a sound. So there are 44 sounds in English. 44 different varieties of sounds in English. Using those, these 44 sounds are represented by different letters. Basically 26 letters. But when actually you write it, it turns out that there are 44 different sounds, which includes 24 consonants and 20 vowels. Okay, so 24 consonant sounds and 20 vowel sounds. So the language is represented by signs and symbols at a written level. Now take example of this cross, okay, plus symbol. What does this represent in human language?
Adding one.
Addition.
Yes, sir.
Earlier symbol for doctor.
Yes, sir.
Right? And maybe a red cross, right? So human languages have signs and symbols. Okay, the script that we have for each particular language, all languages in the world don't have a script, but whichever languages have, they have a system of signs, and they make use of different symbols like this. So human language has this feature, that is they have signs and symbols. Whether dogs also have signs and symbols, whether their language also have signs and symbols, I don't think so. But yes, when it comes to non-verbal gestures, right? As human beings, you make use of different gestures. Same or in a similar way, animals can also make use of different gestures. But again, as I told you, human language is very complex. The number of signs that humans use in that language is unlimited. For example, this 1+ sign has 3 different possible meanings. just we discussed right now. Maybe there could be even more, but we came to realize that one symbol has so many different meanings. But when it comes to non-verbal gestures, animals have a limited gestures, right? If you look at a dog, because we are familiar with dog, that's why I'm using the example of dog again and again. If the dog is angry, what kind of gesture it makes? If a human being is angry, what kind of gesture a human being makes? You see that dog, irrespective of where it is, it makes a limited number of gestures. But same anger is expressed in so many different ways by human beings. So we have this feature of verbal and non-verbal communication in both the human and animal language. So in animal language, there are limitations. The number of non-verbal gestures and postures are limited, whereas human beings have unlimited possibilities. Now coming to shift or displacement, one interesting point brought by, I think, somebody, Sudha or Kavita, I don't know. I don't remember exactly. What is displacement basically is, if you look at human beings can talk about what is happening now and also what happened in the past, as well as what will happen in the future. That is what displacement is. If you look at it in our traditional grammar, we learn this: present, right, past, and future. So a human being can talk about present using the language and also talk about what has happened in the past. He also has, or she also has, as a human being, the potential or the possibility or ability to talk about future using the language. Now, if you look at animal language, you don't find these possibilities. They can't do this. They can't talk about their past. Have you seen any animal talking about what has happened to it in the past? No, it is not possible, because that is not there in their language. Am I correct? Are you following me?
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. But human beings can do. They can talk about their past, they can future, as well as present. Now, context and structure. Okay. Let's take the concept of context. Yeah. Any human communication is incomplete without the context. In human language, context matters a lot. If I say out, what will happen? If I pronounce out in the classroom, what will happen? Perhaps nothing will happen. But if the same word is pronounced by an umpire in a cricket field, what will happen? The player has to leave the field. He has to go back to the pavilion, right? To his place. Isn't it? So human language is always, human communication always happens in a context. If you watch news, you see that many a times politicians clarify saying that no, this has been taken out of context. I didn't mean this. It is blown out of proportion. All those things, right? But you don't see that is happening in case of animals, because human language is complex. It is also context dependent. Okay. So these are the few things that we understood about similarities and dissimilarities about human language and animal language. One interesting thing that I forgot to mention, I'll just right, that is arbitrariness. See, the human language is arbitrary. That is, for example, have you heard of a very popular fruit or king of fruit, that is mango?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is it called? Mango, right?
Yeah.
It is also called aam.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
It's also called mamudi pandu, I think so. Mamidi or mamidi, right? Is it correct? I'm trying to write
Yes,
in
sir.
two different
Yes, sir.
languages. Huh?
Exactly.
Mango, aam, mamudi pandu. Okay. I don't know in how many other languages what it is called, but I know this course I have just written there. Okay, so now there is one particular fruit called fruit which appears like this, right? At least in a chop, in a mango bite ad, we have seen that mango looks like this. Parle mango bite is a chocolate, right? If you remember, right? So this particular fruit is called mango, aam, mamudi pandu, and there are God knows how many different words that are sounds are associated with this particular fruit. So arbitrariness is existing of no relation between these two. This is the fruit, right? And you are calling it mamudi pandu, and God knows why you are calling it mamudi pandu, right? Why somebody else is calling the same thing as aam, and God knows why he is or she is doing that. And why somebody is calling this mango to this same fruit, and God knows why he or she is doing that. Is there a relation between these two? The fruit, which is an objective reality, and this sign or this sound that we have associated to that fruit. Why we are not calling it fish? Why we are not calling it some other pandu? So because of this particular reason, experts of the language say that language is arbitrary. It means the sounds that you produce and assign it to objects is arbitrary, which doesn't have a definite connection. It doesn't have a definite connection. You could easily change the name, call it something else also. If you don't do, some other human being will use different sound for the same fruit, or some other symbol for this particular fruit. So that is why it is called arbitrary. So there is no definite connection between the sound or the symbol and the object. Okay. So there's a few things that I wanted to talk about regarding similarities and dissimilarities between human language and animal language. Now coming to the question, that is how language and literature are related. Now we understood that we use language to communicate. Now if you look at literature, okay, if you look at literature, what do you do using literature? What exactly is achieved using literature? And why is people produce literature? What is the purpose? One point came during the initial interaction, that is, literature is produced to talk about the past, right? Somebody said in class. What else is achieved? What else is the purpose of writing and producing literature? Can you suggest any particular reason why writers write pieces of literature, may it be novel, poetry, short story, essay, or things like that? At somewhere they want to communicate, right? They want to communicate. They want to communicate certain message. They have something in mind. Maybe it could be an idea, right? It could be a feeling, right? It could be some experience. Isn't it? But aren't we using language to do all these things? We use language to achieve this purpose, right? Purpose of communicating ideas, feeling, experiences. Don't you agree?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
We make use of language to communicate ideas, to communicate feelings, to communicate our experiences, and a lot more things like that. But people who call themselves writers, people who produce literature, are doing the same thing, which means in purpose, both language and literature are what? Same.
Interlinked.
Same, basically, right? You are using language to carry out the same thing, and you are using language to do the same thing. Communicate the idea, feeling, experience, right? So that is why you see that language and literature are related. So we got one important point: why language and literature are related? Because in their purpose, both language and literature do the same thing, that is communicate. And communicate what? Ideas, feelings, and experiences. Now, if that is the thing, then why we call literature as literature? And in what way language is involved in production of literature? That is our follow-up or next question. Now, language itself is not same. For example, take Telugu. How many of you speak Telugu? Only one person speaks Telugu. Yeah, please. So there are people who, multiple people who speaks Telugu. Now, if you take the example of Telugu, for the sake of argument, Telugu itself is not same. Telugu that you see being spoken in Telangana is not same as Telugu spoken in Coastal Andhra or Rayalaseema. I have been to all the three different regions. I come from Telangana, but I visited Coastal Andhra multiple times. I visited Rayalaseema districts multiple times. So I know that the Telugu that is being spoken in three different regions is not same, right? And on top of that, because I'm aware of Telugu, I studied Telugu in my schooling. I know that Telugu that is spoken is not same as Telugu that is there in the literature. Do you agree with me that spoken Telugu is not same as the written Telugu?
Yes, sir.
Or spoken English, the English that I am using to teach you will not be same if I write a syllabus unit for the same topic.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
But when I write it and publish it, it becomes a piece of literature. If I speak, it won't be considered as a literature. So in what way the same language is differing? Why when I'm speaking the language English, you're not, or nobody is calling it as a piece of literature. But if I am writing in the same language on the same topic, then they are calling it as literature. So it means I am making some difference. There must be some difference in the way I am speaking and the way I am writing, the way I am using the language. What possibly could be the difference? Because you may be aware of Telugu, right? So we'll take the example from there to understand this point. Now you speak Telugu at home, in your neighborhood, or wherever you go in the region. But that Telugu is not the one that you read in the works of Sri Sri, in the works of Vemana, in the works of Chalam, or in the works of Gurujada Appara. Do you see that? Do you see those to be the same? Those two different variety to be same? No, obviously they are not same. But how they are different? Can you think and give me a possible reason?
Sir, are you talking only about language or also in the expression of languages in songs, like where we see some songs of some indigenous people, right? So they express their native language in the songs, if at all they are folk songs, right? So like that. So is the expression what you're talking about is limited only to spoken or singing also?
No, I am considering singing and spoken as one thing, and written one as a different thing. Okay, we usually consider as written and published thing as part of literature. This is a conventional understanding of literature. Literature is something that is written and published. Okay, so the language that we speak or that we hear, okay, is not same as the one that we read in printed textbooks, printed novel, printed poetry in the same language. You got my point? Are you following me? Am I clear, or shall I repeat my point?
Yes. Yeah.
So in what way that is differing? If the Telugu is same, the people who are using is same, then how come something is considered as a piece of literature, the other is not? What I and you use in our day-to-day life as Telugu is not treated as a piece of literature, part of literature. Whereas something that we write and get it published is considered as piece of literature. There must be some difference in the two. That is why they are treated differently. So when it comes to spoken language, we take context for granted. And in spoken language, we make use of a lot of idioms and proverbs. We make use of a lot of idioms and proverbs. And we make use of limited sounds, limited expressions to convey a lot more meaning. Possibly one more reason is the availability of different non-verbal signs when we are communicating, which is not possible in published writing, written piece. In a written piece, non-verbal clues will be unavailable. If you are communicating with me, if I am looking into your eyes or looking at you, then I can drive the feedback while I am talking to you. Same thing that you cannot do in a written piece. Person who has written is no more there to look at you, and he even don't know who is reading it. Right? So one important feature of a spoken language is, in everyday language, you have different idioms, proverbs being used frequently. In a written language, on the other hand, you see that a lot of literary devices are used. A lot of figures of speech are used to enrich that language. And when it comes to spoken, you have two different sets. Like for example, you go for a everyday conversation, or you sing it. But when it comes to literature, you have poetry as a genre, drama as a genre, fiction, non-fiction. There's so many subgenres also, and each differ because of the way language is used there. Right? In poetry, what makes poetry a poetry? We are using language there to convey a certain message.
Yes.
Then why we are calling it as poetry? Why everything is not called just with one name? Why some piece of written pieces are called poetry, some are called essays, some are called drama, some are called novels or short stories? Why so?
As for related to poetry, it is lyrical,
Yes,
rhyming,
Yes, very good.
and certain poetic devices are used.
Very good.
It is like
Language also,
has
like
some
do we use, do it, make it. So these are the versions which are used in the period of poetry, like Victorian age or other age. We can identify which age poetry it is by the usage of the language.
Somebody else was trying to say something.
poetry means we can use the rhythm as well there, sir. The sound same when the line is ending, the first and the second line in the stanzas, the rhythms also match. The words, last words, they will have the matching.
Yes. Okay, now I'll tell you one thing. We in the beginning we took one point that language starts with the sounds, right? Okay. Some problem with the camera. Anyway, okay. So in the beginning we took the point that language starts at the sound level. Okay. So one language that we are using in our day-to-day life has developed or reached a point where it is coded to begin the writing of that language, right? Which means written language is an advanced stage of language use. I hope I'm making it simple to you to understand. In the initial stages, language is only spoken, but when it reached a certain maturity level, people or speakers of that language sit down to write different signs and symbols, to represent the sounds that we use, that are used in the language. So from there develops the written language. So that is why you see that in spoken we use it in a very limited way. But when it comes to written language, because we are going to advanced stage, there is an advanced use of the language. In what way that is advanced, I'll tell you. Now, one thing we understood is that, in spoken, we make use of idioms and proverbs, and we go for a usually, short conversations. Right? And a lot of our meaning is, communicated with the help of, different body language, right? When it comes to literature, you see that, in case of, poetry, it is distinct from the normal language. The language that we are using in literature is different in many ways, but especially in poetry, it is different because we are following of certain features of the language, which we usually don't use in our everyday language. For example, there is this concept of rhythm, somebody said, right? Rhyming pattern or lyric or whatever you call it. Do we use that in everyday language? We seldom do that. Once in blue moon. But in poetry, we do that frequently. And in fact, because of those features, it is called poetry. Second thing, that rhyming, is established because of foot, meter, and rhyming scheme. These are the three things that makes poetic language a language of the poetry. That makes it a different variety of the language. And for your kind information, in our day-to-day conversation, in our normal usage of the language, we have a complete structure ending at a period, which we call it sentence, right? Complete thought is expressed using sentence. Are you with me or?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
We started at 12, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 1:30 is okay. So in normal usage of the language, our thoughts are expressed. A complete thought is expressed with a sense in a sentence. But if you take the example of poetry, what is the unit? Is it sentence? Or we call it verse? It's verse basically.
Yes.
And we know that it is not compulsory for a verse to end with a period. So we are not following that convention. We are not following that. So the language that is used in one form of literature, that is poetry, is different than the normal usage of the language. In many ways, here, instead of sentence, we have words, which doesn't follow the rules that are followed in a sentence. We have a foot system, we have a meter system, we have a rhyming scheme, and all those things. In English, one very popular foot is iambic. Iambic. I think it's clear now. So this is the foot. It's a very popular foot in English. There are 5 or 6 more, but iambic is the popular foot, okay, which is nothing but unstressed syllables followed by stressed syllable. This is the sequencing of the iambic. And why we have this system in English? Because English is a stressed times language. I hope you understand what does stressed times language mean. When we pronounce different words in the language, that is English, we don't follow a consistent, breath force. We actually do it like this. Okay, like crest and troughs. So the one on which you are giving a stress is called stress syllable. Right? And the one which is going unstressed is called unstressed syllable. So I am is a very popular foot in English poetry. And coming to meter, you have mono, di, tri, tetra, penta, like this. There are a lot of meters. But when it comes to again popular meter, we have pentameter. So in English poetry, a lot of poetry written in iambic pentameter. Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Can you please illustrate these meters like disyllabic, tetra, and penta?
Yeah. Now I told you that in English there are a lot of food. One is called stress and unstressed. Unstressed and stress is called iamb. The name of this food is called iamb. Now I'm just giving you a hypothetical example here. Assume this is the verse, okay, in English. In pronouncing in, where do you think is the stress?
And
Yeah, I has a stress, right? N doesn't have a stress because
yes,
N is na, ni, right? Nu. It could be any of these, stressed way of pronouncing the N sound, right? But when you are doing in, you are stopping at half. If it is N, you are stopping here, right? You're not saying na, ni, nu. So this is unstressed one. In case of I, you're doing that in, E, right? The, okay, is stress. And dark, so similarly, I'm just trying to illustrate one point because I haven't, thought of, I would have to explain all these things to you. I'm just giving you a hypothetical example to just show you what is stress and unstress. So for example, this is one stress and stress. And then you have, say, for example, this is stress and this is unstress. So this is one. So this is one, this is two. Say, for example, these are, similarly, there are 5 more such arrangements. So overall, this will be called pentameter. Okay. Why? You have 5 such arrangements. Penta means 5 and meter means a combination of these. So you have a total of 5. So in English poetry, usually you have this unstressed, unstressed, and this kind of 5 possible arrangements in a line, in single line. So that is why it is called pentameter. I hope you understood this. Okay, so I don't know where were we and why we have come here. I was explaining something else and we moved. Yeah. So coming to poetry, so poetry has this feature of foot, meter, and rhyming scheme. Now night is one ending. Say for example A. And there is one more similar sounding word, bright, in the second line. So it will be again A. Then something like, for example, dark, right? Then you have bark. So this dark is not same as the initially occurring sounds. So what you do is B. This again B. And there is one more fifth line, that is day, which is again different. So C. So rhyming scheme will be A, B, B, C. In a 5-line poetry, you have this rhyming scheme. Got it? So popular forms of poetry is sonnet, 14-line one, where you have 14 lines in a poem. Like a popular iambic pentameter, you have sonnet as a popular form in English poetry, so which has 14 lines in a sequence. Okay, so this kind of usage of language makes poetry as poetry. Okay, the way normal, everyday language is characterized by usage of idioms and proverbs. Similarly, a poetry is characterized because of this style of or form of usage of the language. Another important feature is that poetry is a form of literature, right? It is structured in a certain way. That's why it's called a form of literature. Similarly, you have drama, novel, short story, blah blah blah. Irrespective of any genre, literature can have all the literary devices and figures of speech. What I mean to say is, unlike normal everyday language, literary language carries literary devices and figures of speech as special features. Now, can you list out a few literary figures and literary devices and figures of speech? I'll give you one metaphor.
Simile, onomatopoeia, oxymoron, alliteration, pun.
Yeah. So there are multiple such literary devices that are used in producing literature. It's not that every piece of literature should contain all the literary devices or figures of speech, but it may contain any of these. It may contain any of this, and that is why it becomes a piece of literature. Got it? If you remember one particular speech which is very famous given by Antony in Julius Caesar. Okay? Brutus is an honorable man. Do you remember that Antony's speech?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Satirical.
Okay, so in that particular piece of literature, you see that one particular line repeating after a few lines, every after a few lines.
Yes, sir.
Because Brutus is an honorable man. Brutus is an honorable
Yes.
man. So it's a technique. It's also a kind of technique in literature. So not that you take example of Robert Frost's poem, right? Where he says, "Woods are lovely, dark and deep. I have promises to keep. Miles to go before I sleep. Miles to go before I sleep." So you see that there is a pattern of repetition of sounds. That makes it interesting, and that makes it a piece of literature. There are so many such literary devices that are used to make any normal language into to the language of literature. I think we have discussed quite a lot of things in our first lecture, and I request you to pose questions and seek clarification. Excuse me. Allow me to have some water, please. Yes, so we discuss a lot more things regarding language and literature and how language and literature are related. And I try to answer a few of your, I try to clarify a few of your doubts. And before we close today's session, we have 10 minutes more. So I request you to ask any further doubts that you have or anything related to the topic that we discussed today.
Sir, have we completed the units from 1 to 7 now, as we have stopped at poetry, and it is unit 8, the analysis of literary language and poetry?
Yes, yes. Basically, in our offline classes, we discuss multiple topics, and I think we have completed 2 blocks: language as discourse and language of literature. And from there, we also talked about third block. Since it's not a conventional class, so we are not supposed to go topic wise in a sequential order. Basically, to discuss whatever doubts we have. Yet, what I feel is, if you come up with questions or doubts, I'll try to clarify them in the following classes.
Thank you, sir. I was inquiring only to know that so that we can be prepared ahead before the next session, so that if any doubts are there, that could be clarified during the.
Yeah, thank you for that. I would like to discuss about structuralism in the next class. So if you come prepared, that is, if you read it once from the given material, it would be easier for you to understand. And after reading that, if you get any doubts, I'll clarify. The reason we have this concept of providing learning material is to help you to make learning easier. Even after reading, sometimes it happens that some students don't understand things fully. They may come up with queries. So I'm always there to clarify such doubts, and if possible, I'll also discuss some basic concepts related to the topic. Yes, next. Any other questions or clarification that you want from my end?
What would
shall
be
I
the
ask questions to you?
Yes, sir, you can ask from the topics that you have taught now.
Okay. What does arbitrariness mean in the context of language?
It's the sounds we produce and assign the sound to the objects. It's called as arbitrary.
Is it correct? Can anybody second that explanation? What I basically try to explain there is arbitrariness is lack of any concrete relation between the object and different sounds and symbols that we are attaching to it. It is lack of that concrete connection. It's not a fixed one. It's not a permanent one. It is arbitrary. May change. That is what arbitrary is. I hope you understood that.
Yes, sir, noted that point.
Yeah. Anybody else would like to say anything? So in next class, we are going to talk about structuralism and post-structuralism if possible. So do come prepared after going through the material provided by the university, and please make note of any point that you have not understood, anything that you would like to ask me. Okay, so take care of yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. You too.
Thank you, sir.